I'm recording myself the whole time.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us today. Quick half an hour, hopefully over your lunch breaks. Today, I'm joined by Chris Heverin, Managing Director of Spartan Race Australia, amongst many other event organisations as well. Chris, really looking forward to hearing your story today, mate. So thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Shannon. Look forward to it, mate.
Yeah, lovely, cool. So I guess for the webinar today, for those that aren't aware of who we are at Rosterfy, white label volunteer engagement technology, and we work with a lot of large organisations around the world to manage their volunteers, and we work with a lot like Spartan and Tough Mudder throughout the US, and a lot of mass participation organisations. So where we're coming from this is how do you engage your volunteers as best as possible through these tough times and make sure that those volunteers that you're going to need in the future will be there and still engage when you come back. So that's what a big focus for today will be. So the agenda, what we're going to cover off is a little bit about us, and then most importantly about Chris and Spartan Race. So the introduction and changing landscape for mass participation events. And on that as well, mate, what you and I and a few others behind the scenes have been working on is the Australian Mass Participation Sporting Events Alliance. So really going to dive into a bit more information about that and how people can get involved and what the purpose is. So that's probably one key item. And then as all webinars that we're doing, probably leaving the audience with a couple of key tips to ensure your workforce are engaged. I know that Spartan are well renowned globally for the way they manage their volunteers in probably a different way to the masses. So I'd love to hear more of your story about how Spartan do that. But Chris, firstly, mate, would love to just start with 5-10 minutes, just giving us your background in events and a bit of your history, because it's certainly an interesting one for me. Over to you, mate.
Thanks, Shannon. 5 to 10 minutes, that's a long time, mate. I don't know if it'll take that long.
See how we go.
Look, I got into the industry back in the late 80s. I worked in the AFL. I got a job at Carlton Football Club. I worked there for a number of years. Decided that circumstances changed a little bit with my family, and decided that it was an opportunity to go out on my own. Yep. And so set up my own business. Through the 90s, primarily worked in professional sport, particularly basketball. Yep. Did a lot of work in basketball. We had a contract with the North Melbourne Giants in the NBL at that time. It was flying.
Yeah,
full houses. Yep. It was pretty cool. Brett Brown, who's the coach of the Philadelphia now, was the coach of the Giants back in those days. Okay. It was a pretty cool place to work. So I had a contract with them for 5 years, and
yep.
And then the Giants merged, and a whole lot of things changed. But interestingly, as that developed, sort of initially spent the first few years just focusing on Melbourne, yep. And then obviously Sydney Olympics, was on the agenda.
Yep.
And I was looking desperately for an angle to get into Sydney to how to work in the Olympics, because obviously yep. That was the jewel in the crown.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I bought into a business up in Sydney, and
yep.
And we picked up some pretty significant contracts at the Olympics.
Yep.
We worked with Basketball Australia and the Boomers and the Opals. We worked with Athletics Australia, and we also worked with Visy Industries. Sure. On their sponsorship program and delivering yep. their events. So that was a highlight for me. That was right up there, mate, in terms of highlights. That was back, you can't believe it's 20 years ago, yep. But it was amazing, and it was a great event to be part of, and just in a small, really good. And then through the 2000s, probably up, sort of got a few. With some partners, we expanded. We did the international expansion and opened up an office in London, and worked in the US.
Yeah.
Had a bit of fun over there.
Yeah.
And we sort of thought, okay, work. And so at that really looked at, okay, well, where's the money? Yep. And there was no money in corporate, and it was very hard to get people were struggling a bit, but there was money in government, and. So sort of very similar times to now. We pivoted as a business and really focused on getting government, and then developed quite a number of events around, including event that I know that you're fond of, that you attended, which is Cape to Cape over in. So myself and a business partner in Perth and Dover, we created Cape to Cape 8, and the first year we're still at it, but we were struggling a bit, but we thought we had something pretty. And over 10 years, we developed it up so that in 2017, Cape to Cape was the biggest event, the biggest stage race in the world with the number of participants.
Awesome.
So in
Amazing
Margaret
race.
River in WA, and so that was again to build that up from scratch was great.
Yep.
We then opened up a sister event called Port to Port in the Hunter Valley in Newcastle, and then we got a approach from Ironman, and we sold that business to those guys a couple of years ago. So
yep.
And they're still going strong, which is really pleasing. So
yeah.
And then in 2016, I got introduced to excuse me, to Joe DeSena, who's the owner of Spartan, the CEO of Spartan, and had some discussions with him, and he approached me about would I be interested in taking over Spartan in Australia. So
awesome.
So towards the end of 2016, I took it over and have been running Spartan here, and we expanded it ever since, and into New Zealand last year as well.
Yep.
And it's been an interesting ride. That's been very interesting. And
awesome, mate.
Yeah.
And you're involved with it seems like a lot more than just Spartan at the moment in terms of your network, at least in terms of what you've been involved with. So it's been, it's a great journey, mate, and one that I think a lot of people can look up to in terms of following on from the events industry, especially a lot of young people too. So, and a lot of it was taking control of it in your own hands, which I really like. So,
yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, mate. Anyway,
yeah, the pros and cons, of course, of these things, which I'm sure we're going through at the moment. But one thing, mates, Joe DeSena, pretty successful businessman, obviously, pretty strong individual as well. What's he like as a person and to work with?
He's a good guy. He's out there. There's absolutely no doubt about that. He's very passionate.
Yep.
And he's got very thoughts on where he thinks that Spartan should go and what it should do.
Yep.
But he's a personable guy. He's easy to get along with, and and he's a guy that he wants to communicate with people. He loves engaging with people, and he spends his life promoting the Spartan story and healthy lifestyle and fit, active. So he's a good guy.
Yeah, awesome. No worries. And he does seem like that as well. It's people, you need to have those sort of characters to make a change. And it's I followed Joe for quite some time. He seems to be doing great things. And I guess if we move on, mate, from yourself to what we're now sort of creating a little behind the scenes here, the Australian Mass Participation Sports Events Alliance. So when you gave me a call about that to go, here's an opportunity to bring the event space together during these tough times and come out a more united force. It was an instant yes, and I guess the others included are all instant yeses as well. Do you want to give me some more background around why you came up with that initiative and what we're hoping to achieve here?
Sure. Well, I'd been following what had been happening in the US, and they had formed a group over there which they called a coalition.
Sure.
And I looked at it really carefully, and I thought, well, what's going to work in Australia? Is this something we should do? I had a meeting with the guy who's the MD of Tough Mudder globally, and he's out in New York, and that was a really good chat. He sort of gave me some background on what they were trying to achieve and how they went about it.
Sure.
So I figured that sometimes it's one of those moments where you sort of think, okay, well, I've taken the handball. Do I run with it, or do I sit back? And I just felt that, in terms of our industry, I've felt for some time that we should be working under an integrated model. We should be closer together. There's lots of things that we can do as an industry that in terms of lobbying government, but also best practice, integrated marketing. I think there's a whole range of things that I've been looking at now and I thought, okay, let's go for it. So I contacted about, including yourself, a variety of people, registrators, other event operators, and I said, just basically said to everybody to look at a broad church here, and we should be working to come out the other side of COVID. And so the group we've formed has been fantastic. I think we've got 15 people to date on the executive group, including Ironman and Sydney Running Festival, Gold Coast Marathon,
Energy,
a whole range of people, which is excellent, including former New South Wales Premier Nathan Rees is part of that as well, which has been a great advisor. And then we've got about 200 people already signed up, so to actually support our MOU that we've created. And we're looking for more people. So this is a good opportunity to call out if you are a supplier or you're an event operator or you're participating in the mass participation industry, get on there and sign on. And it's really important that we get as many people as possible so that we can go to government and we can get some stimulus back in our industry. We were the first to be shut down. So that day, the 13th of March, when they announced that we had to, anybody over 500 people had to stop, we were the first to be shut, and we're going to be the last back. So we need that support. And as a group, we're working very closely with people like Craig Sheridan, who's involved from a security and health perspective, get best practice, risk mitigation strategies, media, driving the message out there. We'll be launching a media campaign in early June. It's a cool product and really excited. And the support we've had has been great. They're working with like-minded people, really stimulating, and we've got a lot in a couple of weeks. It's been brilliant.
Pretty proactive bunch, isn't it? I think if there's a group that's ever going to turn something around pretty quick, it'll be this one.
It's great.
It's great being involved. And I guess for those people wanting to be involved, we're pushing out some more content on Monday. So what's that, mid to late May? Why would people register, and what's the benefit in it for them, and I guess what's the purpose of it for people registering?
I think it's a really good question. As I said before, I think in all the communication in the media about the whole range of industries, at no stage have I seen anything particularly about the mass participation events.
Correct.
We drive hundreds of millions of dollars to the economy. We employ tens of thousands of people. We work generally in regional areas where we impact tourism directly, where we bring thousands of people into communities who spend millions of dollars. And at the moment, we're not being, or it's probably a stronger word, but we're not considered really. And so by joining together and by working as a group and getting it, involved and supported by the industry, come together as one, we're then able to go to with a really strong position. And what we're going to government, very strongly saying stimulus in our industry. So every was part of our group, and it'll be broader as well. But we're looking for money to be distributed so that we can get through this. We can pay our bills. We can employ our staff, and that's a big part of it. But also, the ongoing element to that is having an industry-wide best practice, so that we can assist every operator from the club running the fun run with 100 people, the big city to surf events with 85,000. Set of principles that we need to run these events. And that's part of what we're putting out there from an
makes sense. There's so many in there, and there's no silver bullets now in regard to what will help. But I think the voice of the industry, those that have been affected, is the one that we can, I guess, all rely on to come together at this time. Is hurting to try and take case to get the support that's required, because even just little things and in this, but the uncertainty of the return of events come back, but what does that mean for the event organisers in regards to costs and, what do you need to swallow an event? And I think the broad stroke approach that government take on these things could have negative effects on the events industry if, I guess, input isn't heard from people like yourself, the alliance that we're putting together here, because it's a pretty unsustainable industry at times if costs are going to be increased. Is that a fair statement?
I think you're on the money. There's a whole lot of considerations, and that's part of the what we're doing within the group. We've got people looking at, what are scenarios and what are the revenue impacts our industry, because the restrictions, we've got to put on healthy events. People have got to be comfortable coming to the events, and we understand that and respect that. But also we've got to be able to put on events that are realistic, and we can, and I think from that perspective, being able to go to government with a solution, that's very much about what we're working on at the moment. And we've got some great people involved, industry experts who are leaders, and that's how we're trying to to drive it through.
Yeah, for sure, mate. Awesome. Well, I guess thanks for the quick summary there. And guys, keep an eye out from Monday next week in regards to content coming out, launching in socials and press releases coming out. So we're together, we're stronger, I guess is the summary there. So Chris, maybe moving on, mate, to Spartan and where you are at the moment. And if we can link back to what your volunteer engagement and what you guys are doing, because I think there's a lot to be learnt from the Spartan experience. If I just pull up the presentation again. Just in here, so maybe Chris, just an overview, please, of Spartan's event program. Obviously, it's different now, but when you're in full swing, what does it look like, and how do you operate?
Yeah, well, we have we basically operate we have a structure of four tiers, and starting at the bottom, we have what we call, we're basically kids races. So a very soft entry point as kids only races. And they've been proven to be quite successful, and they're standalone events, which is really good. Then we move into a model that we've created, which is an entry point model for Spartan, which we call the City Sprint. And the City Sprint is some research that we did where racers were saying to us they'd like to try Spartan, but in the first instance, they'd want a relatively soft entry. So we've done a number of City Sprints in places like the MCG in Melbourne, Sydney Olympic Park in Sydney, Canberra, and they've been entry points. Then we move into what we call our signature races, and the signature races are, involved in a regional destination, usually on a big farm, massive farm, and that's where you have the river crossings, the mud, elevation, usually lots of changes, huge number of obstacles, 40, 50 obstacles, depending on the race type. And then we have our pinnacle event once a year. We have the trifecta weekend, and that's been in Bright for the last few years. And at the trifecta weekend, we offer everything. We have discipline is out there, and that's a massively popular event, which we're really.
I think I'm linking back to your earlier with the cycling event in WA. We brought the world's largest mountain bike to Margaret River, which is a small kind of Victoria. In terms of the tour impact you would have had as an event, I would imagine would experience a significant influx from what Spartan can bring there. Saying that?
Oh, absolutely. It's multi, and there's the accommodations booked out for a radius of about 50 k's. So and the racers love it, and it's a beautiful town, and
it is.
And we're hoping, we have released that our goal for this year is we're hoping to be able to get back our first event to be in Bright in November.
Awesome.
That's what we're hoping for. We've made it very clear that there's a long way to go, and on a scale of 1 to 10, we're probably about 1.5. But but we're at least we're letting people know that that's what we're aiming to do.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm sure the Bright would be happy to see you guys back.
A great partner of Spartan, right? Great.
Yeah, very good, mate. Well, I guess maybe if we can move our focus to the management side. We might just maybe spend the last 10 minutes or so focused on this. I might share my screen again, where a couple of key tips, I guess, for workforce managers in regards to the way that they can engage their volunteers. Sure, share a lens to COVID and innovation room, but I think they're back up and running at some time. So maybe referring to this at the best. Spartan, and from your experience, is engage volunteers to get the most out of them and make sure you're providing the most to them as well.
Sure, mate. Well, I think before I go to the 5 top tips, Spartan has quite a sophisticated volunteer model. And that model, what it does is that we a frequent flyer program. So
sure, people
are able to donate their time, participate as volunteers in 2 to 3 days leading up to the event, over the weekend, and then on the Monday is a pack down. Yep. And they volunteer credits and volunteer points. You use those to redeem against races. So they're able to basically. And we get a lot of keen people who that's what they don't have a lot of money, but they want to be part of Spartan. Yep. And so they build up their, and they're able to do either a 5K sprint or a 10K super or a beast by accumulating their points. And that works really well. They also get a T-shirt and they get lunch and they get plenty of options. So we found that takes quite a lot of management and it takes a lot of work behind the scenes. So in putting that together, we have a time volunteers manager who looks after and runs that program and liaises very carefully throughout the whole year, again in good time. We also have a program called Street Team, is the next level up. And on Street, about 290 people involved in that across the country. Oh. And Street Team is where commit to the next level. You're a button, and part of that job is you're getting. So it's going to local gyms, going to local cafes. It's putting up posters. It's promoting flyers. It's bringing groups into Spartan, and they have their own frequent flyer program, if you like. There's a merchandise program that they get that's exclusively only to Street Team, and awesome, and they build up their, and they're the people that are really passionate about Spartan, and they come to the event, the future race TEDs, and they work with Street Team manager Mel, and they're a big part of Spartan as well. And then from Street Team, quite a number of the people that are on our paid race team, our 30 to 40 people that are paid at the event, have graduated from Street Team and have gone into the becoming paid employees. So it's a good model. It works really well. And then in terms of those top 5, so mindful of that, we're working on managing this on a daily basis. I sort of look at it. I try to keep these things really simple, and our team, really follows these philosophies, and they're much more a broad approach from our team, more so than me personally. But the proactive planning is really critical for each event, and that goes down to, with an obstacle race where you've got danger on every corner. We need to have volunteers, and we need to have the right people in the right places working alongside our full-time team. So that planning is really critical prior to each race, and that includes lots of engagement. For our marshals out on the course, there's online training, and so all of that happens. That planning is important.
Yeah, and on that, jump in. I think a lot of events sometimes because those volunteers are as important as your paid team and your full-time staff. They can see an incident and act quickly. And if they're not trained or engaged enough, then it's very easy for them to turn a blind eye, essentially, or even turn up to that event and not know what to do. So that engagement and preparation, you mentioned some training. Is that down to specific role? How do you make sure your volunteers are empowered to do the job you need them to?
Yeah, it's a good question. So again, the volunteers are broken down into segments. We have 8 people across a Spartan race who engage with the volunteers and manage the volunteers.
Yeah.
So we have zone leaders, we have the race director. So in terms of the marshals, which is where they're involved heavily in terms of the timing and governance of a Spartan race, particularly for the elites and the age group competitors.
Yep.
They do online training. So beforehand, so they're taught how to use the equipment, what they need to do. In terms of the volunteers, who are general volunteers, there are multiple briefings throughout the day. They have zone leaders that they work through who are part of who are part of the full-time team, and they engage with those. And many of them are repeat, so they come back and they'll do it. They come back and that works really, really well. But to that second point, where we've volunteers at every event's a challenge. Like that's our goal. Our goal is 150 to 200 people at every Spartan race. But often we struggle for whatever reason. It's a tough challenge. But our managers,
think you're alone, Chris.
Yeah, that's right. It's across the board, and
it is.
Yeah, but our managers are really are really professional. They know what they're doing, and I think it's really important to back them. Give them let them make the decisions on that. There's no micromanagement. They know what they need to do. They know where the hotspots are. They know how to manage it, and we've found that to be really successful at Spartan. That back them in, support what. I think that permeates then through to the volunteers and the other people as well.
Yep, makes sense. And then some strong communication across all areas, workforce, pre, during, and post. Encourage a friendly, happy atmosphere, and genuinely recognise your team, contract, volunteer, workforce as much as possible. I think that's awesome, mate. Very good summary there. And just conscious, Chris, if there's one best way that you recognise your volunteers in your team, what's one little gem you think having in that recognition area?
Last year we introduced the Spartan Awards, and so that was really because what we did is we called on our community to nominate people across, I think it was 8 different, which includes the volunteers. It was the Street of the Year, Volunteer of the Year, and we asked them to vote. So it wasn't something that management team that we put together. We organised it, and we didn't want it to be a popularity contest. It was very much about, the decision was based on 50-50, 50% our community and 50% from our team. And each of the winners was really popular, really well received, and people who put a lot. We got a lot of people who put themselves out there, and in the short term that was good. The second thing we do, which is the obvious thing, but it's really important, is that we thank every volunteer after every race. So we actually make an effort to personally thank them, and we think it's only a little thing, but we all love recognition, and the fact that we to say thank.
I think it's volunteers don't ask them when they don't receive the small bit. It is almost more harshly way, because they're giving their time and free, and they could very easily be doing something else. So that recognition part is that perhaps the mass participation can learn a lot from what you do at Spartan in terms of some awards and really recognising and thanking volunteers. And there's plenty more strategies out there on top of that as well. So Chris, mate, thank you so much for your time today. I guess for us next, we've got quite a few going on. One with our webinars, that is. The next one coming up is with Sterling volunteers in the US. So one for the Spartan US team, Chris, how to background check your years and automate as many of your processes as possible. And the next one after that is probably we have coming up is the Miami Dolphins, and how they use Rosterfy to engage their fans, volunteers, and community to ultimately make a great impact for those that their club. They've got about 30,000 years as a club. Miami Dolphins, it's one of the best in the world. So, Chris, thank you for your time today, mate. We'll call it a wrap there, and looking forward to Monday to see what's next. And let's see what we can all do together.
Great, Shannon. Really good, mate. We
Good on you,
appreciate
mate.
it.
All right. Thanks a lot. We'll speak to you soon.